Hi everyone, welcome to this podcast for the GCSE Spoken Language Controlled Assessment. This is for Steve's GCSE group. We're going to be looking at the Paris Hilton interview with David Letterman. If you're at the college and looking at different clips, this podcast will still be of use to you, help you out to write the assessment, but obviously you'll be looking at a different. So here's the title from my group: How do the ways that Paris Hilton and David Letterman speak and present themselves reflect on their personal backgrounds, experiences, and the format context of the show? So in other words, looking at the spoken language by these two in their paralinguistics, we're basically doing an analysis of that in a controlled assessment. So a bit of background on David Letterman. He's a very famous American chat show host, The Late Show with David Letterman. He's 62 years old. He's hosted the show for over 25 years. He's formerly a stand-up comedian. He's American, and he's known for not tolerating celebrities on his show he has no interest in. So almost if he feels like they're not a match for him intellectually, he tends to be a bit mean to them and takes mickey out of them and makes fun of them. Paris Hilton, who's the guest on the show that we're looking at, she was 26 years old at the time of the interview. Her father owns Hilton Hotels. She's worth over $300 million. She's a reality TV star. And just before this interview, so a bit of context, she served a 45-day prison sentence for driving with a suspended driving licence. What happened was that she got caught driving under the influence of alcohol. Her licence was taken off her, but she carried on driving with a disqualified licence, and they caught her and they put her in prison for 45 days. So a bit of controlled assessment info then, if you've forgotten this. It's between 800 to 1,000 words. It's completed over 2 lessons. It's on Microsoft Word. Actually, this is actually incorrect. You are actually allowed spell check for this controlled assessment. And you're allowed an annotated transcript, and a page of notes can be taken into the controlled assessment. And I will talk about the annotated transcript in a minute. So a bit of context about chat shows in general then. They're there to entertain, but for the person who's coming onto the show, they're there to promote a product. David Letterman needs to draw out information. He will only have a certain time limit to speak to his guests. Remember that David Letterman is on his home turf. He's been doing it for over 25 years. So he's very comfortable. However, the guests may not have been on before, so they might be a bit nervous. And remember, when people apply to get tickets to this show, they don't really know who the guests are going to be, because they've bought tickets to see David Letterman. So be aware of that when you write your controlled assessment. They are going to be on his side. So there's our title again. Feel free to pause the video at any moment if you feel I'm going too quick. So our introduction for our essay. Okay, so this looks like quite a lot, but I will explain it in detail. A lot of any introduction is taking chunks out of the exam question. So remember, our question is, how do the ways that blah, blah, blah. So the ways in which people speak and present themselves can reveal much about their personal background. So I've taken that directly from my title, haven't I? This sentence here is directly from the title. In this interview conducted by the Late Show host David Letterman in 2007, Paris Hilton is the guest. The context of the clip is a typical chat show format of a comedic host interviewing a celebrity. Letterman, 62, has been presenting the show for over 25 years and has a background in stand-up comedy. Hilton, 26, is a reality TV millionairess and has recently served a 45-day prison sentence. This assignment will analyse how the differences in the participants' ages, experience and backgrounds are reflected in the ways they speak and present themselves. So the top part of the introduction and the bottom part of the intro are basically taken from my exam question. So if you look at these two and this here, you'll see that it's almost explaining what the title means a little bit. The middle part of the paragraph is just giving the reader a bit of context. Remember, the context is the situation where the speech and the interview takes place. Just giving a bit of context about the Letterman show and Paris Hilton and Letterman, a little bit of context, a little bit of information for the reader, who, remember, a lot of the people who are going to read this assignment may not have seen the clip. So you're given a little bit of brief intro into your assignment. So when I was talking about the transcript, this is what I mean. So if we look at these here, a transcript is basically a record of spontaneous speech. So for my students, they will have, and you will have for your clip, you will have a transcript which you are allowed to annotate. So my students have annotated the things we're going to talk about in the controlled assessments. They've annotated stress, small talk, fillers, jargon, interruption, repetition, and paralinguistics. So all the way through, we've making little notes. On the transcript, you're not allowed to write any PE paragraphs or any detailed draft or anything like that, but you are allowed to put little notes, maybe perhaps some bullet points, and my students have colour coded it for their ease. So remember, you're allowed to take this into the account, into the controlled assessment. I will put this on bpcenglish.wordpress, our website, so if you need to get a copy of it, you can get a copy of the transcript there. So paralinguistics, so in other words, body language, but we're also going to be talking about tone of voice, volume of voice, and things like that. So these images here are a sort of collage of different reactions and body language and paralinguistics through the 4.5 minute clip. Even in this clip here, you can see various ways in which Paris Hilton is acting, and also how Letterman acts around her. So what I got my students to do is we noticed all the paralinguistics that Paris Hilton and David Letterman did, and then we sort of try to work out, well, what effect did this has on the conversation. Remember, you're not going to get past the D if you just say what happens. So if you say that she stuck her lip out, if you're saying she was waving to the audience, you're not going to get a good grade. You're going to say what effect that has on the conversation. So what I got my students to do was to, in groups, they try to work out what these things, what meanings these had for the conversation, and we're going to go through these now. So this is what I mean when I say that she was looking away to the audience. So we said that her outfit is quite sexual, it's glamorous, she's obviously trying to impress. When her name is called out for the interview, she does a little wave, so it's almost sexual, flirty, a little bit nervous. Her seating is, she's very exposed to the audience, she seems nervous. While Letterman has a desk in front of him, she has nothing, so there's no barrier between her and the audience, so she's very exposed. She's actually sat lower. If you look at the clip, she's sat lower than Letterman, which makes her feel probably less powerful, less important than him. Her smile fades, so whenever Letterman makes a joke at her expense, and that happens quite a lot, she does try to smile. However, you can tell that the smile fades pretty quickly. She's finding it tough, she's finding it embarrassing. So when she looks to the audience, she looks to the side. It's almost as if she's looking for help. She's not happy. Maybe her agent or her PR woman or even a member of her family, or maybe a friend is on the side of the stage and she's almost looking to them for support in terms of, well, what do I do? So eye contact throughout, which you could probably say is a little bit unconventional. Normally if someone's uncomfortable, they try to avert their gaze. However, we could possibly argue that she's looking at Letterman so intently, she's almost trying to get him to change his questions. At the end, she sticks out her bottom lip and changes her tone of voice. You can see her bottom lip in the photos here. Her tone of voice changes from that of a normal, like average 26-year-old into a very youngish, immature voice. So we almost could say here that we're seeing her spoilt side. It's almost like we're getting an insight into how that she would act with her millionaire dad. It's almost like she's turned Letterman into like a surrogate father figure, where she's almost begging for him to sort of stop making fun of her. Real laugh at the end. It's almost like the laughs during the interview are all a little bit fake and all a bit put on. However, she actually laughs at the end when he mentions about buying her a parakeet, buying her a present, and it's almost as if we get to see the real Paris Hilton after she's been subjected to all the prison questions. After she knows she's safe, she begins to be herself a little bit more. Okay, same with Letterman then, with the same thing. So his outfit, it's very formal, and it's a context of a chat show, meaning if you look at any chat show, Graham Norton, Jonathan Ross, James Corden, they all wear fashionable suits. However, his suit is a little bit old-fashioned. It probably reflects his age of 62. So the audience, so remember the audience are fans of the show, they've come to see Letterman. With the seating, he's sat behind the so unlike Paris Hilton, he is protected from the audience. This possibly makes him feel a bit safer and more confident. He's sat higher than Paris Hilton. This shows that he's powerful, he's dominant, he's in control. So when he feels like he goes too far, he almost leans into her. He puts his hand on the armrest, almost telling her, "Don't worry about it. I know I've gone too far. I'll stop now. I'm only having a joke." He does a hand gesture towards the end, and I'll show you this when we look at paralinguistics further, which almost says, it's almost like a cutting gesture which senses that he's gone too far and he will stop. It's his hands together during it whenever he's thinking of a question. So this shows perhaps that he's thinking of his next question, that he's thinking these up on the spot. Remember, our point evidence explain is we make a point for our article, we give evidence for it, and then we explain in our explanation how our evidence proves our point. So, for example, my point here is Paris Hilton's paralinguistics tell us a lot about her emotions during the interview. So we're saying her body language and things gives away how she feels. My evidence for this point is she is sat in front of the audience and is positioned lower than Letterman. So now what I'm going to say in my explanation is why the fact that she was sat in front of the audience with nothing, alone and exposed, and sat lower than Letterman, why that shows some of her emotions. Okay, so we can actually see here just from this still that he's got the desk here in front of him protecting him from the audience, yeah, while she's totally exposed. We can also see that he's actually sat a lot higher, so he's up on a step and she's sat low. So imagine if you were sat in Paris Hilton's chair, this sort of experienced, confident 62-year-old guy is there and he's almost bearing down on you. It probably would put you in a bit of a defensive position. So my explanation is this means she's much more exposed to the audience and there's no barrier between her and the audience, unlike David Letterman, who has a desk. So then I'm going to say how this makes her feel. So this automatically makes her uncomfortable, whilst Letterman feels dominant and powerful. The fact that Hilton enters the show after Letterman, is exposed to the audience and is sat lower than Letterman, all result in the host taking control of the conversation from the outset, so from the start. So let's look at, and then remember, obviously you're not going to put it as a PE in your exam. In your exam, you just put it into one paragraph like that. So another point we can make about the paralinguistics could be that Letterman's hand gestures shows the audience that he's going to change the question topic. He makes a stop gesture. So like I say, I will put the video clip in at this point. So all I'm going to do now, my explanation is saying why this stop gesture is telling the audience that he's going to change the question topic. Okay, here it is in a little bit of a still. So all I'm doing now is explaining it. So this hand movement suggests that he knows he's gone too far with his jokes and he's feeling a little bad. So if you look at the video clip, he's almost shaking his head and saying, oh no, that was a bit too much. He's almost feeling bad that the audience are laughing at Paris Hilton. Okay, and there it is in a PE paragraph. So another point we can make is that Letterman uses his paralinguistic to make Hilton more secure. And my evidence for this is that as the audience are laughing at Paris Hilton, Letterman leans in towards Paris Hilton. Okay, so this use of body language is meant to tell Paris Hilton that he's only joking and not to worry. So by closing the distance between them, he makes Hilton feel more secure. So if he was doing these really insulting jokes and one-liners and then didn't look at her, didn't give her eye contact, kept a lot of space, she'd probably feel more threatened. But the fact that he's leaning in, he's trying to make eye contact with her, is probably saying to her that he isn't totally serious and not to worry. And there it is in a paragraph. So another point to make for paralinguistics. Paris Hilton uses paralinguistics to try and get sympathy from Letterman and the audience, but now you're making me sad, hurting my feelings.
So now I haven't seen you since.
I know, but now you're making me sad that I came because you're
no,
hurting my
please,
feelings.
no, please, don't be sad. Are you really sad? No. Are you feeling better?
And this is what she does. She sticks her lip out and she changes her tone of voice. So I'm going to say why that action is her trying to get sympathy. And there you go, even closer. Probably people her age, you wouldn't see too many people doing that sort of thing. So Hilton is feeling so desperate that she pushes out her bottom lip to suggest how sad she is. It makes her look faintly ridiculous to portray herself as a toddler, and it's almost like she's treating Letterman as her father. This may also give the viewing audience an insight into what she is like with her own father. So it's almost her, someone who puts their bottom lip out is a child. Or a little girl who maybe can't get her mummy or daddy is not going to buy her the toy that she likes. So it's almost like she's reverting to how she is a kid because she's so defenseless. She can't really reply to him intellectually. She hasn't really got any good points to say or to defend herself. So the only way she can really defend herself is by acting like a child. I've also said she also changes her tone and pitch of her voice into that of a young girl, which she hopes will help Letterman ease off with his questioning. So she's almost playing up her girly side, hoping that if she acts like a defenceless female, then Letterman will let her off. And it actually does work. After she does this, he does stop. And then again, it's into a PE paragraph. Okay, so here's another paragraph for paralinguistics. Paralinguistics is going to be quite a big chunk of your controlled assessment. I'd say you should be at least looking to write 2 or 3 big paralinguistic PE paragraphs. So another one is, throughout the interview, Letterman uses sarcastic tone of voice to embarrass Hilton. My evidence is, feeling better now, I'll buy you a parakeet.
Yes.
I'll buy you a parakeet.
So this is Letterman joking that he will buy her a present if he cheers herself up. This could imply that Letterman sees through Hilton's childish behaviour and is acting like a dad role for a joke. So he can almost see that her pretending to be like a little kid is so pathetic that he's almost, in a joke, he's almost pretending to be a dad, that he will buy her a present if she cheers up. So now we're going to move on to fillers. So remember, if you forgot what fillers are, they are are. So they are things to fill the conversation. So I got my students to look at the transcript, look at the video, and just to say, how often do they use fillers and why do they use fillers? Okay, so Paris Hilton uses fillers throughout, but not hugely. She probably just uses in terms of just the amount normal people would use fillers. Remember, fillers aren't just for people who are nervous or are not sure. We all use fillers. Sometimes have to think about the words to say, so it's not unusual to use fillers. She probably does use them a little bit when she's unsure or she's uncomfortable with the Letterman questions. Well, David Letterman actually does use quite a lot of fillers throughout, and he uses fillers when he's trying to ask a question or to do a joke. Because his questions are pretty much made up on the spot, he doesn't seem to have any cards in front of him like a lot of chat show hosts. He almost uses fillers because he's trying to put the question in the right way.
Have you made
So my point for fillers is Letterman uses fillers throughout the conversation, and my evidence is the fillers part. And I'm just saying why these fillers affect the conversation and why he uses them. So I've said the fillers used by Letterman indicate he is thinking these questions up on the spot, and he's trying to come up with interesting questions and also satisfy his audience comedically. When Hilton uses fillers, it normally reflects she is unsure how to answer the question posed by Letterman. So I'm basically saying that Letterman uses them to think up questions, and also because he has to be funny for his audience, he's probably thinking of punchline, while Hilton just uses them just because she's unsure of how to answer it. Okay, another reason why a bit of a higher level answer, you could say why Letterman uses fillers is this one. So Letterman's use of a filler could tell the audience what he really thinks of Paris Hilton. So right at the start of the intro, he says, a woman of many talents.
Our first guest is a woman of many talents. She is a film.
So he almost pauses and he almost smiles when he says many talents. So the explanation of this could be there is a slight smile on Letterman's face when he introduces her, and the filler may indicate to the audience that DL, David Letterman, does not agree she has talent. So I'm almost suggesting that because he's paused when he said she's talented, I'm almost suggesting that he's indicating that actually he thinks that she's not particularly talented at all. Small talk, language that we use just to be polite and just to be nice to each other. So hi, how are you, or the weather's. It basically is language that doesn't really mean anything. That's why it's called small talk. So here's the example of the small talk in the clip.
You look wonderful.
Thank you.
You look better than ever. Thank you so much for being here. How have you been? You all right?
Good. Good to be back in New York.
Yeah, good to have you here. How much time do you spend in New York City? A lot?
Not as often as I'd like.
Which do you prefer, New York City or Los Angeles?
I like both. I like the weather in LA better, but I love New York City.
New York City is exciting, though, isn't it?
I was born here, yeah.
Yeah, good for you.
My point is, at the start of the interview, both guests use small talk. My evidence is Letterman tells Hilton she is looking wonderful. Okay, and I'm just going to explain how this small talk affects the conversation. So Letterman is doing this to ease the guest into the interview with short, simple questions. So really, really simple point evidence explained there. So it's just saying why small talk is used. So he's doing it to make her feel comfortable, make her feel like she can say whatever she likes in the interview, not to feel nervous. Another thing we could do for small talk is that it's followed by more examples of small talk as the two discuss New York. So, and my evidence is Paris Hilton tells the audience and Letterman she was born here, and saying it's good to be back in New York. So these two pieces of these two quotes about small talk could actually, another point you could make is that Paris Hilton is trying to get on the side of the audience. So by saying she was born in New York and it's good to be back, it's almost like it's as if Hilton is trying to charm the audience, and Letterman by saying that she's one of them. So she was almost like, because she was born in New York, is that she was one of the audience. Because remember, the Late Show, the interview does take place in New York. Okay, so stress and emphasis on words. So for example, if you pause before, if you say one word louder, you're going to give it stress. So for example, if you look at this image here, if you say that, put the stress into different places, it means different things. So I didn't say you were stupid. I didn't say you were stupid. I didn't say you were stupid. Okay, so putting the stress on different words gives the sentence slightly different meaning. So here's the bits that are really stressed that we want to talk about. I want to talk about where he says the product, he says can, he puts emphasis on that.
This is her latest fragrance called Can. Take a look at this right there. Ladies and gentlemen, here's the lovely Paris Hilton.
And he also puts on the emphasis on her name. So my point for stress is that when introducing Hilton, he brings emphasis to the celebrity product that Hilton is there to sell. And then the evidence is can. Okay, and here we've got Letterman showing off the perfume that she's flogging. And then my explanation is the fact that Letterman stresses the name of the product makes the name stand out more to the audience and the people at home. So the fact that he said it a bit louder and he's paused before just gives attention to that word. It strikes the ear a bit easier. Okay, and then I'm just going to talk a little bit about the context of chat shows, where I spoke about it earlier in the podcast that Letterman's there to try to make people laugh. However, the celebrity there is trying to promote something. So if it's an actor, they're trying to promote a film. If it's a musician playing a song, they're trying to promote their album. Paris Hilton is there to try and plug a perfume and a clothing line. Another stress that he makes, David Letterman, is when he stresses the word slammer, which is the term for prison. So my point is that he stresses certain words when he's trying to make a joke. And then I've got the evidence of have your friends, that's meant to be, treated you differently since you've been out of the slammer.
Have your friends treated you differently since you've been out of the slammer?
So I put slammer in capitals because that was the word that was stressed by Letterman. So I'm basically saying, why has he stressed that word? So the stressing of the key word in the joke makes the punchline even funnier and catches the attention more, as Letterman has given its greater problems. So I'm saying it's because that the slam of the word, that is the punchline, that is the joke in the sentence. He's brought attention to that word by giving it emphasis. So power. So in a conversation, who's in control of the conversation and who's the submissive person in the conversation? So I got my students to do these following questions. So number one, why do you think Letterman has most of the power on The Late Show with David Letterman? Try to give me 3 reasons why. Question 2, when does he take the power? Question 3, what question lets Hilton know this will be a tough interview? And number 4, how does Hilton try to take the power back? Letterman takes the power straight away because he's the one who gets to ask the questions. He takes the power straight away. If you notice the video clip, Hilton is silent and she's waiting for Letterman to instigate the conversation because he is the host of the show. So number 2, when does he take the power? Okay, so I sort of answered that one. So why do you think Letterman has most of the power? Well, first of all, it's his program. Secondly, he's been doing it for over 25 years, so he's experienced. And first of all, just the context of the show is that it's an interview show, so he has to ask the questions. So what question lets Hilton know this will be a tough interview? I would say they do a little bit of small talk, but then when he says out of the blue, how would you like being in jail? I would say that's a clear sign to Hilton that this is going to be a tough interview. Question 4, how does Hilton try and take the power back? Well, she does it in quite a few ways. One way she does it is by saying she doesn't want to answer questions anymore. And the second way she does it is by refusing to answer the question. And then thirdly and finally, she actually reverts to being almost like a 10-year-old girl. So here's some PEs for power. So Letterman uses experience to gain the power in the conversation. Evidence he is 62 and presented the show for over 25 years. So I'm just going to say how the fact that he's 62 and presented it for so long gives him power. Well, as he has presented the show for so long, Letterman is very professional and calm on the show. Hilton is only 26 and not experienced to take on Letterman when the questions become more and more challenging. So I've said because of his experience and Hilton's inexperience, it gives him the power. So this one hasn't really got any real evidence because it's obviously that he's the host. So as he presents the programme, Letterman decides on the questions and Hilton has to answer them. Letterman doesn't have the cards and seems to make the questions up on the spot. This makes it even more uncomfortable as she has no idea what he's going to say. He could do a huge amount of questions on different topics, or he could stay on one topic for a long time, which he does. He does this with the prison questions to Hilton's discomfort. So I'm basically saying because Letterman is the host, he can decide whatever he wants to do, and because of that, that gives him the power because Hilton feels a bit nervous about what he's going to say next. Letterman uses comedy to gain the power in the conversation, someone you met in prison. So this is the part where an audience member calls out and he makes a very quick joke.
I love you, Paris! Love you too.
Yeah. Somebody you met in prison?
So when a solitary audience member offers her support by declaring his love, Hilton responds with a blown kiss and I love you too. So another one, Letterman uses provocative questions to gain the power in the conversation. How do you like being in jail?
Love New York City.
New York City is exciting, though, isn't it?
I was born here, yeah.
Yeah, good for you. How'd you like being in jail?
This question is very blunt and changes the tone of the interview from then on. It is a very unconventional question to ask straight away in a celebrity interview, and the bluntness shocks Paris Hilton, who can only offer not too much. Paris Hilton tries to laugh along with the audience but can't sustain a laugh for long. Her facial expression indicates she is upset or worried about where the interview is heading. So I'm saying he gains the power by asking a bit of a blunt, bit of a daring question, where before this it had been very much small talk and very nice questions, and then he comes out of something from left field of how would you like being in jail, which shocks her. So almost it's so shocking to her that he gains the power because she just doesn't know what to say. So jargon, so remember this is technical language, so you might have called jargon, hair and beauty jargon, sports jargon. So the only real piece of jargon, and you could even just maybe suggest it's even slang, is when Letterman uses the term slammer. So I said to my students, why doesn't he just say jail? Because slammer does mean jail. And why did the audience laugh?
Have your friends treated you differently since you've been out of the slammer?
Well, the reason he doesn't say jail is that he is making a joke. So slammer is almost like a working class term, or maybe prisoners who have done really sort of like petty crimes use. The reason it's funny is that because it's almost like a comparison between this girl who's worth $300 million and it's so ridiculous to think that she'd be in that prison environment. And the last thing she would be calling it is a slammer. It's far like beneath her. So my jargon is the Letterman uses prison jargon for comedic effect when he is questioning Hilton on her time in prison. And then my evidence is, have your friends treated you differently since you've been out the slammer? And I'm basically explaining why that is a joke. So the term slammer is a term working class prisoners would use, not someone like Paris Hilton, and Letterman uses it to make fun of her. This stress, so remember I've said that he's given emphasis to it, this stress jargon for prison makes the audience shriek with laughter as they know Hilton is uncomfortable with the topic. They also know that Hilton's background of being heir to a £300 million fortune, which contrasts to her time in a common prison cell. So interruption. So how often do they interrupt and why do they interrupt? Well, Paris Hilton interrupts a few times during the interview, and she basically does it when she's so frustrated with the prison topic, she's just trying to get it off. And Letterman will interrupt her throughout. And he tends to do this whenever he's bored or he's trying to hurry along, or if you can tell he's thought of a joke and he's just trying to get it in there. So my PEs for interruptions are: Paris Hilton uses interruptions to try and change the line of questioning in the middle of the interview. Her evidence is I don't want to talk about it anymore.
Have you made?
But I've moved on with my life, so I don't really want to talk about it anymore.
Yeah, but I know.
Hilton tries to throw Letterman off topic by interrupting him and letting him know she is frustrated. As she interrupts, she leans back on the sofa and smiles as the audience laugh and applaud. It's almost as if Paris Hilton is feeling more comfortable at standing up to the dominant, older Letterman, and she repositions herself in the chair. However, the fact that she smiles lessens the impact on her firmer stance with Letterman. So I'm basically saying she's interrupting him to throw him off questioning and almost get him to change topic. And then I've gone on to talk about her paralinguistics, the fact that after she says this, she leans back on the sofa almost as if she feels a bit more relaxed.
I know.
Okay, interruption. So Letterman interrupts Paris Hilton throughout the interview. Is my point. My evidence is you feel like you can survive anything now. Sure.
Well, obviously it was a very traumatic experience.
God, was it? You know, I think
did it, so
yeah.
I feel like I can do anything
you
now.
can survive anything.
Yeah.
Sure.
So explanation. This suggests he is impatient to get her on to his next point, and he wants to hurry Hilton along. He may also interrupt to make a joke at a guest's expense. This shows Letterman's dominance in the conversation, and he interrupts whenever he wants to. So that shows how powerful it is that he feels like he can interrupt her at any point. So conclusion, okay? So the conclusion is just going to be summing up your main points and looking back at the exam question. So my conclusion is throughout the interview, Letterman takes the lead as would be expected of the host, and he is naturally more confident. Paris is more defensive and responds with short answers, occasionally trying to steer the conversation to a different, less sensitive topic. The combinations of the differences between them and their interaction makes for an enjoyable, engaging, and less traditional interview. So, if you're doing your essay, just look at your main points that you've made and just put them into the conclusion like this. Okay, that's it, with a little reminder of Paris Hilton's bottom lip wobbling. I will also split this video into sort of 5 or 6 different sections, so into paralinguistics, jargon, power, and so on. So if you just want to watch a quick clip, watch them. Yeah, any questions, leave me a comment.